1804, when a slave defeated an empire and Europe buried it. They called it the Pearl of the Antilles. But for the people who bled on that land every single day, it was hell disguised as paradise. Saint-Domingue, the French colony on the island we now call Haiti, was the richest colony in the entire world by the late 1700s. Its sugar fed the sweet cravings of Europe. Its coffee kept French salons awake and talking, and its profits flowed into Paris like a golden river. But behind all that wealth, behind the powdered wigs and gilded teacups, was a brutal truth. More than 90% of the people on that island were enslaved. Not just enslaved, brutalized, maimed, tortured, raped, and worked to death. Plantations in Saint-Domingue weren't just farms. They were death machines. On average, a slave in Saint-Domingue lived just 7 years after arriving. 7. The soil was watered with blood. The fields grew with screams, and the masters, mostly white French colonists, called it order. But the world was starting to crack. In 1789, across the ocean in France, the people stormed the Bastille. The French Revolution was on. Liberty, equality, fraternity, they cried. The chains of monarchy were breaking. The king was shaking. The poor demanded bread, justice, and a voice. And in Saint-Domingue, the enslaved people were watching, listening, waiting, because if liberty was a right for all men, then why did those same men whip them like animals? Among those watching was a man named Toussaint Louverture. Now Toussaint wasn't just any man. He'd been born a slave, gained freedom, educated himself, became a driver, a coachman, then a plantation manager. He read French literature, studied Enlightenment philosophy, knew strategy like a general, and he'd watched carefully how men rose and fell in revolutions. He knew the moment was coming, and when it did, he'd be ready. In 1791, it began. Not with a parade, not with a speech, with fire. That August, in the northern plains of Saint-Domingue, enslaved Africans began setting fire to plantations, burning down the very system that had crushed them for centuries. They killed overseers, seized weapons, formed camps in the mountains and forests, and what started as a revolt turned into something more, a war. At first, no one took it seriously. The French thought they'd squash it in days. But the revolt spread like wildfire. Slaves from every region joined. Former Maroons, runaway slaves who had hidden in the mountains, became guerrilla leaders, and soon, a small army of rebels controlled vast parts of the colony. And guess who rose through the ranks like a storm? Toussaint. He wasn't the loudest, he wasn't the bloodiest, but he was the smartest. He trained men like European soldiers, organized supply lines, built alliances, even wrote letters to the French, Spanish, and British, because this wasn't just a war of guns, it was a war of ideas. And Toussaint knew that if the revolution was going to survive, it had to play every angle. Here's where it gets twisted. While the slaves were revolting, France was in chaos. The king was executed. A republic was declared. And the National Convention in Paris, desperate to hold on to its colonies, made a bold move. In 1794, they abolished slavery in all French colonies. Boom. Toussaint, loyal to liberty and smart enough to play politics, now claimed allegiance to the French Republic. He switched sides, turned his guns against the Spanish and the British who were trying to invade the island. And over the next few years, Toussaint became the de facto leader of Saint-Domingue. Not just a rebel, a governor. He restored order, rebuilt plantations, this time with paid workers, drafted a constitution, declared himself governor for life. But here's the part they don't want you to know. He wasn't building a colony. He was building a nation led by a black man, run by formerly enslaved people, based on liberty and equality, and to the white powers of the world. That was terrifying. You think the French, British, Spanish, and Americans were going to let that stand? A successful black republic? One that challenged slavery, colonialism, and white supremacy all at once? Number, that was unthinkable. Which is why, in 1802, Napoleon Bonaparte sent his brother-in-law, General Charles Leclerc, to crush Toussaint and take back the colony. Napoleon had just crowned himself emperor. He didn't care about liberty anymore. He wanted profit, sugar, power, and he wanted Toussaint gone. So 20,000 French troops landed on the island. At first, Toussaint tried to negotiate, but Leclerc came with fire. And the war that followed? It was brutal. Cities burned, fields destroyed, thousands killed. But the French didn't just bring muskets. They brought disease. Yellow fever tore through the troops, and soon the very land Toussaint had fought for was defending him in return. By June, Toussaint agreed to a ceasefire. He believed peace was still possible, that France might honor his leadership if he stepped down. But he made one fatal mistake. He trusted Napoleon. Leclerc invited him to a meeting. Toussaint came in peace. They arrested him, put him in chains, put him on a ship, and sent him to France, where he was locked away in a cold mountain prison. He would never see his home again. In April 1703, Toussaint Louverture died in captivity, starved, frozen, and erased. He had freed a colony, built a government, outwitted empires. But in the end, the man who'd been born in chains died in one too. But the story doesn't end there. Because just before his arrest, Toussaint said something chilling. "In overthrowing me, you have cut down only the trunk of the tree of black liberty in Saint-Domingue. It will spring up again by the roots, for they are numerous and deep." And he was right. Because one man was still out there, burning with vengeance. His name? Jean-Jacques Dessalines. And if Toussaint was the mind of the revolution, Dessalines was the fist. Toussaint was gone, betrayed, shackled, frozen in a prison cell in the mountains of France. But the revolution didn't die with him. It evolved. It burned hotter, meaner, less patient. And at the center of this new firestorm stood a man who had once fought under Toussaint's command, but had no more room in his heart for forgiveness. His name was Jean-Jacques Dessalines. If Toussaint was the tactician, Dessalines was the executioner. Brutally efficient, utterly fearless, and singular in his focus, to drive every last French soldier into the sea and make sure they never came back. Where Toussaint had tried to work with France, Dessalines saw no more room for diplomacy. They had shown their hand. They lured Toussaint with a smile and stabbed him with chains. That was enough. And so, in 1803, the revolution exploded into its final, bloodiest chapter. It wasn't politics anymore. This was a war of extermination. The French came with the arrogance of empire, but they were facing an army that had been born in chains, forged in fire, and raised on betrayal. These weren't just soldiers. They were people fighting for their ancestors, for the screams that had echoed through sugarcane fields for centuries, for a homeland that had only ever known pain. Dessalines didn't just want victory. He wanted vengeance, and the world had never seen anything like what was coming next. The French, still under General Leclerc and later General Rochambeau, had underestimated everything. They thought this was just another colonial skirmish, a group of ragtag rebels to be silenced with force. But they were wrong. Yellow fever wiped out entire regiments, supply lines crumbled, and in the forests and mountains of Saint-Domingue, the rebels fought with terrifying precision. Guerrilla warfare. Ambushes, night raids, entire towns that turned into death traps for the French. And then Dessalines made his most ruthless move. He launched a scorched earth campaign. He ordered that all resources that could help the French, food, infrastructure, even livestock, be burned to ash. He would starve them out, break their spirit, force them to choke on the island that had once made them rich, and it worked. By late 1803, the French were in full retreat. The dream of reclaiming Saint-Domingue was dead. Napoleon, watching from across the Atlantic, realized something horrifying. An army of former slaves had just defeated one of the greatest military machines in Europe. Let that sink in. No colony had ever done it. No group of formerly enslaved people had ever risen up, fought a global empire, and won. But here's the part that shakes you. They didn't just win a battle. They won their independence. On January 1st, 1804, Dessalines stood before a new nation and declared its name, Haiti. It was the first black republic in the world, the second independent nation in the Western Hemisphere after the United States, and it was founded not on colonization or commerce, but on liberation. Dessalines was blunt. This land would never again bow to Europe, never again feed empires with sugar grown by broken backs, never again trust treaties written in Paris. He made it clear, Haiti would be free or Haiti would be ashes. But the victory came with scars. Dessalines ordered the mass execution of most remaining French citizens on the island, an act still debated by historians. Was it revenge? Was it fear of betrayal? Was it the only way to ensure that Haiti would not be recolonized? Whatever the answer, the blood ran deep, and Europe, humiliated and furious, began its final revenge. Silence. France refused to acknowledge Haiti's independence. So did Britain. So did Spain. So did the United States. They all agreed quietly and viciously to erase Haiti from the storybooks, to treat it not as a triumph of human courage, but as a danger. A bad example, a warning to the enslaved in their own colonies. What happened next was a slow suffocation. France, in 1825, returned with warships and an ultimatum: pay us reparations or face invasion. Yes, you read that right. The slave owners demanded reparations from the former slaves for the loss of their property. That property, human beings. And Haiti paid. For over a century, Haiti bled out wealth to its former oppressor, plunging into debt, poverty, and isolation, all because it had dared to do the unthinkable: win. Meanwhile, Europe wrote its textbooks. It told stories of Napoleon's greatness, of American liberty, of British Empire. But the Haitian Revolution, that was either skipped entirely or painted as chaos, violence, savagery. But not here. Not today. Because the truth is, the Haitian Revolution was the most successful slave revolt in human history. It changed the trajectory of colonialism. It inspired enslaved people around the globe. It proved that freedom could not just be begged for, it could be taken. And its erasure was not an accident. It was a strategy. Because if people knew that empires could be broken, that chains could be shattered, the whole world order would tremble. So they buried it. Until now, they erased it from the books, from the lectures, from the minds of generations who grew up believing freedom came politely, like a signature on a scroll or a handshake in a marble hall. But freedom doesn't knock gently. It breaks in. It rips the chains out of the ground. And Haiti? Haiti was a scream in a world built on silence. By 1804, it stood, battered, bloodied, but free. The first nation ever founded by enslaved people who overthrew their masters. It should have been the beginning of something glorious. But instead, it was the start of something cruel. Global punishment. France would not forgive its humiliation. The United States, still holding its own people in chains, wouldn't dare recognize a black republic. Britain, knee-deep in its own colonial profits, turned its back too. Haiti had won independence, but not respect, not protection, not trade. It was treated like a virus, a threat, something to be quarantined, not celebrated. And what does a world do to a rebel it cannot control? It starves it. The isolation began immediately. Trade embargoes, diplomatic boycotts, no international recognition. Haiti couldn't buy weapons, couldn't sell sugar, couldn't even get ships to dock in its ports. While the U.S. was building banks and the French were funding opera houses with colonial riches, Haiti, once the wealthiest colony on Earth, was being squeezed dry. And then came the heist of the century. 1825. France returns, not with diplomats, but with 14 warships armed to the teeth. They anchor off the coast and deliver an ultimatum that reads like a joke if it wasn't so monstrous. Haiti must pay France 150 million francs as compensation. Not to the formerly enslaved, mind you, but to the slave owners for the loss of their property. Let's be clear. France was demanding reparations from the people it had enslaved because they escaped. And Haiti? With no allies, no navy, and the French cannons aimed straight at them? They signed. That debt strangled Haiti for generations. To pay it, the country had to borrow money from French banks. Yes, that's how sick it was. The freed had to pay their oppressors and take out loans to do it. That's why Haiti stayed poor. That's why its roads crumbled while France glittered. Because the revolution wasn't over. It had just changed form. And you've probably never heard this in school. Because that's the point. They taught you about Napoleon, about the American founding fathers, about revolutions that wore powdered wigs and quoted philosophers. But the one where enslaved people took their freedom with blood, fire, and intellect, the one that shattered an empire, that's too dangerous. So now, if you're still with us, let me say something real quick. If stories like this are hitting you deep, if you've ever felt that school left too much out, or that someone was controlling the lens of history, then this channel is for you. Go ahead and hit that like button, drop a comment with what shocked you most so far, and subscribe if you want more untold truths from Uncle Luke. Because we're not just telling stories here. We're dragging buried history into the light. Now, back to the silence. The rest of the world watched Haiti struggle and said nothing. In fact, they used its story as a warning. Slave owners in America whispered to each other, "Don't let what happened in Saint-Domingue happen here." Newspapers ran stories describing Haitians as violent, barbaric, ungrateful. They weren't freedom fighters anymore. They were painted as a threat to civilization itself. And yet, even in the dark, Haiti shined. It became a symbol, a beacon for abolitionists, a warning to tyrants, and to every enslaved person from Georgia to Brazil, it was proof. Proof that chains could be broken, that power could be flipped, that black freedom wasn't a fantasy. It was real, it was possible, and it had a name, Haiti. But the world doesn't like reminders of its sins. So the textbooks left it out. The maps shrunk it. The empires rewrote the ending. They turned Toussaint into a footnote, turned Dessalines into a butcher, and turned the revolution into an accident. Not a triumph. But history isn't what's printed. It's what's felt, remembered, fought for, and in the shadows, Haiti's fire never went out. After 1704, every nation that called itself civilized had the same reaction to Haiti's victory, panic. Not because of the violence, not because of the revolution itself, but because of what it meant, that people in chains could fight back, that wealth built on suffering could be burned to the ground, that those at the bottom could win. The world wasn't afraid of Haiti. It was afraid of what Haiti represented. And so what followed wasn't just isolation, it was punishment by design, systemic, generational, and brutal. A warning written in real time. The playbook was simple. Make sure no one ever dared to follow Haiti's example. The global powers, especially France, Britain, and the United States, began creating a new colonial model, one that looked less like chains and more like contracts, less like whips and more like debt, diplomacy, and destabilization. Let's break it down. While Haiti was forced to pay reparations to its former masters, France flourished. The money Haiti sent back, more than $20 billion in today's currency, was used to fund public works, rebuild Paris after the Napoleonic Wars, and enrich French banks. In short, they built museums with money stolen from people they once enslaved. Meanwhile, Haiti's economy was gutted. It couldn't build schools, couldn't invest in roads, couldn't develop industry, and every time it tried to stand up, it was kicked back down. Take a look at the United States. For over half a century, America refused to recognize Haiti's independence. You know why? Because the U.S. was still a slave-owning nation, terrified that Haiti's story might inspire rebellion on its own plantations. Even Abraham Lincoln didn't recognize Haiti officially until 1862, after the Civil War had already begun. So Haiti stood alone, a free black republic in a world where white supremacy was still law. That made it a target. Every internal conflict, every political misstep, every earthquake or hurricane, the world used it as evidence that black people couldn't govern themselves, that freedom without colonizers was chaos. But they never said the quiet part out loud, that they had rigged the game. The financial system, designed to keep Haiti in debt, the trade agreements, written to benefit the very empires that once enslaved them. Foreign banks controlled Haitian currency. Foreign governments backed coups and interventions. And when Haiti refused to play along, they sent in the troops. In 1915, the United States invaded Haiti under the excuse of restoring order. But the real goal? Control. American forces occupied Haiti for 19 years, seized the Haitian National Bank, rewrote the Constitution, and forced Haitian farmers into corvée labor, unpaid work on roads and plantations. Yes, slavery, reinvented. And you wonder why Haiti's been kept poor. It's not natural, it's not cultural, it's engineered. And here's the coldest part of all. While Haiti bled, the world stole its story. You know who learned from the Haitian Revolution? Not just abolitionists, revolutionaries, freedom fighters, and oppressed peoples all over the globe. From South America to West Africa to Southeast Asia, the flame that was lit in Saint-Domingue spread. It whispered, "You don't have to wait for freedom. You can take it." Simón Bolívar, the great liberator of Latin America, was sheltered and armed by Haiti. In 1815, when Bolívar was exiled and desperate, it was Haiti that gave him ships, weapons, and soldiers. You don't see that in most textbooks. But it happened. And in return, Haiti asked for one thing: free the slaves wherever you go. That's the legacy they tried to erase. Haiti didn't just fight for itself. It fought for everyone who'd ever been broken by empire. But every time it lifted its head, the world pushed it back down. When Haiti held elections, foreign governments interfered. When leaders tried to chart a new course, they were ousted, assassinated, or replaced with puppet regimes. And always, always, the story was the same. Haiti is unstable. Haitians can't govern. It's a failed state. But that's the trick. You break something. Then you blame it for being broken. And then you bury the reasons why. What they don't say is this: Haiti was never allowed to heal, never given the resources, never offered a seat at the global table. Because to let Haiti rise again would be to admit that the system, the entire colonial legacy, was built on lies. And power doesn't admit lies. It just rewrites them. So here we are, 2 centuries later, and the revolution that terrified kings and rewrote the rules is barely mentioned. Toussaint is a statue in a corner of Paris. Dessalines is called a tyrant in sanitized textbooks. And Haiti is treated like a footnote, but not here. Not now. Because truth has a memory, and no matter how deep you bury it, it grows back. In the cracks, in the whispers, in stories passed down from ancestor to child, in voices like yours, listening, questioning, refusing to forget. There's a reason no empire ever teaches you about Haiti. Because Haiti didn't just rebel, it won. It didn't beg for freedom. It didn't sign a treaty with its oppressors. It burned the old world down and stood on top of the ashes with its own flag, its own name, and its own truth. And ever since, the world has been trying to pretend that never happened. Ask yourself this: Why is it we all know about the American Revolution, the French Revolution, even the Russian one, but barely anyone talks about the only successful slave revolt in history? Why do they teach you about the Emancipation Proclamation, but not that a nation of former slaves declared themselves free before any Western power dared to? Why does the world still hesitate to say Haiti's name with the reverence it deserves? Because if you tell the truth about Haiti, you have to tell the truth about power. That freedom isn't granted. It's stolen, bled for, seized by the people who were never supposed to have it. That the systems we call democracy and civilization were built on the backs of the very people they tried to destroy. That maybe, just maybe, the heroes of history aren't the men in powdered wigs, but the ones who crawled out of chains and fought anyway. Haiti terrified the world, and it still does. It's not because it's poor. It's because it reminds us what happens when the oppressed realize they're stronger than the system that holds them. It's a mirror empires don't want to look into, because in Haiti's reflection, they don't see nobility. They see theft, violence, arrogance, fear. But that reflection is the truth. Toussaint Louverture, a man born enslaved who read philosophy and outmaneuvered Napoleon's generals, never got to see the nation he dreamed of rise. He died freezing in a dungeon because the French were too scared of what he might build. Jean-Jacques Dessalines, the warrior who took Haiti's freedom with fire and steel, was later assassinated by his own countrymen, divided by internal conflict, manipulated by outside forces who couldn't afford to see him succeed. And yet, the flame never died. Every time someone rises against oppression, that's Haiti. Every time a colonized people say, "No more," that's Haiti. Every time a lie about power crumbles, that's Haiti. You don't have to be Haitian to carry that flame. You just have to understand that history is not what they told you in school. It's what they buried. It's what they were afraid of. It's what they hope you never ask about. But you're asking now. And that's how it starts. Because when you look at Haiti, you see the blueprint of both freedom and punishment. You see the cost of dignity, the weight of resistance, but you also see something they could never kill. Legacy. A legacy that says, "We are not your slaves." A legacy that screams, "We are not your victims." A legacy that lives in every revolution that followed, in every act of resistance that echoed through time. From the independence of Latin American nations, to the anti-colonial fights in Africa, to the civil rights movement in America, Haiti was there first. And still, the world owes Haiti. Not just in money, though yes, they do. France's extortion set Haiti back over 100 years. Reparations aren't just a nice idea. They're a historical necessity. But the world owes Haiti something deeper. The truth. The truth in textbooks. The truth in classrooms. The truth in documentaries and museums and speeches from politicians who pretend freedom just happened politely and gradually. It didn't. Sometimes freedom comes with fire. Sometimes the most revolutionary thing a person can do is say, no. No more sugar fields. No more lashes. No more stolen names or forced religions or foreign flags waving over stolen soil. Just no. That's what Haiti said in 1804. And the echo of that no is still shaking the walls of the powerful today. So if you've made it to the end of this story, don't let it just be a story. Let it be a memory you carry, a truth you tell, a flame you pass on, because someone out there still believes the lie, that freedom has to be given, that the winners are always the ones who wore the crown or signed the paper, that real change is impossible without permission. But you know better now. You know what happened. In 1804, the world's most powerful empire was defeated by people who weren't supposed to exist at all. And when they tried to bury that truth, Haiti became the soil, and now we're digging it back up.